Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to this webinar, Production Scheduling Based on Material Availability Information, a deep dive. My name is Martin and I'm the host for today's webinar. I'm also the CEO and one of the owners of Netronic Software from the beautiful city of Aachen in Germany. And as most of you know, we build visual scheduling extensions for Business Central, and one of those extensions is called VAPS, Visual Advanced Production Scheduler. And the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler comes with a functionality that allows you to base your production scheduling on material availability information. And typically, when we are doing demos, I got a lot of questions, or we get a lot of questions about this functionality. And when we actually have customers who decide for the VAPS, and when we do trainings and workshops, then material availability and why it is needed and why we get the information is always a big topic. So I started to build some educational material, started to build some slides around the whole topic of how we deal with material availability within the VAPS. And most recently, in the last couple of customer workshops that I did, I get really good feedback on the slides that I built, on the content that we have on material availability, on the way of how we do it. And a lot of people told me like, okay, this is great now that we are starting to learn the product, but would have been even better to if we would have had this information earlier, because then we potentially would have decided faster for the VAPS. So I decided to take the content, this bit of educational content that I have, and wrap this a little bit differently and share this with you in a public webinar today. As this is a webinar, all of you guys are on mute. This is for the organizational purposes of webinars, as we all know. And yes, of course, we record the session, so we will make the recording available on our YouTube channel tonight, German time, and tomorrow, German time, on our website. So if you miss it, or if you have to step out, then you can watch the recording at any time and any place, and of course for free. So you are muted, but if you have a question, then use the GoToWebinar chat pane. When I'm doing demos, I sometimes do not see that you're posting a question there, but then when I'm coming back from demos, then I see it and then I will answer it. So if you have a question, I will answer it definitively over the course of this webinar. If it turns out that the question is too, let's say, complicated or too specific to individual and maybe applies to you, but not to other folks on the webinar, then I will suggest to have a separate conversation, a one-to-one meeting, or we can figure it out via email. If you're new to Netronic, if you're hearing or if you're seeing my webinars the first time, then I highly encourage you and I kindly ask you to look me up at LinkedIn. There are not that many Martin Karloviches working for Netronic at LinkedIn. You will find an Elmar Karlovich, that is my brother. But if you look up me, then just feel free to connect. I would really appreciate this, because sometimes also LinkedIn is a really cool medium to quickly exchange information, to share ideas, to network, and to connect. So please feel free to reach out, and I would be happy if you do so. And with this, let's get straight away into the webinar and into the content of today. And I started to start my webinars with this type of slide, where I try to give you an early indication if this webinar is right for you or not. And I always differentiate how familiar you should be, I say with Netronic, but it's with Netronic product, or in this case with our Business Central extension. So if this is webinar more for beginners who hear us maybe and visit us the first time or attend one of their first webinars, or if this is for people who are really familiar with what we do. And then we have webinars where we focus more on features and functions, and webinars where I talk about business process and best practices, which I did last week when we talked about, what was it? I think combined man and machine power related scheduling. And then I will have another one coming up next week, where I will talk actually about making delivery time commitment based on capacity and material. This would be fun. And then I added this icon here to the slide, so that tells you that everything I do today relates to our product called VAPS. It is not applicable to the VPS, the product that we have as well, and it's also not applicable to the VJS that we have for resource and job scheduling. This is just what we talk about today, is a feature of our product, Visual Advanced Production Scheduler. So the topic or the focus of this webinar is really, I will talk about not features and function, but I will talk about the major function of the VAPS. And this is more an advanced type of webinar because I'm doing a functional deep dive. So I won't explain the VAPS. I won't explain how to do finite capacity scheduling with the VAPS. I won't explain how you do combined machine and manpower related scheduling. I did this last week. And I won't explain what you see on the screen. I will just use the VAPS to show how we are dealing with material availability information. So I'm really very tight in terms of topics. So we will not cover the entire product. So it should be really good if you're familiar with the VAPS. If not, reach out to me and then we do a separate meeting where I introduce the VAPS to you and we make the first step first. So today it is for those who are familiar with the VAPS and who want to learn more about how the VAPS deals with material availability. So talking about material availability, I think material availability is something that Business Central is actually quite strong with. So when we go, when we go to the item card, we can look at material availability by BOM level, by event, by period. And we have the same kind of information if we're on the production order line, and then on the production order line, there is an item, and for that item, we can also look for material availability. So to some degree, there are a lot of material availability information within Business Central. However, somehow this material availability information that is available in Business Central per se somehow got lost when it comes to production orders, right? I mean, we have it on the production order line, but we don't have it on the production component line. So we see when that material that we have on the production order line, we can pull up material availability information for that item on the production order line. But this is typically not the information that we are looking for, but we are looking for when is all the material that is required to build the item that I have on this production order line, when is this material available? And this information somehow, I think, is lost within Business Central. You can get it, but it is really tedious to get it. So then you have to go to the production component line and then pull up the material availability information for all of these items, and this is quite kind of tedious. So like lost, what is really missing within Business Central is the material availability information on production order level or production order line level. I cannot easily pull a report that tells me, hey, for this production order, these are the components, these one are missing, these one are here, or these are the components, these are on stock. Those will come in 2 weeks from a purchase order, and these ones that are missing. This information is in Business Central, but it is you can find it, but like finding it is a hell of a work, especially if you have like very deep BOMs with a lot of components. And so somehow this information got lost from the perspective of the production order. And when we built the VAPS, we said, okay, we need to kind of find this information again, because this information, if my material is available to plan a production order, to start a production order, this is significant information for almost every manufacturing company we speak with. And so when we built the VAPS, we actually found something that we now call EMAD, and I will use this abbreviation quite frequently today. It is earliest material availability date. So within the VAPS, within our extension that is called Visual Advanced Production Scheduler, we have a functionality that we call EMAD, and this is the capability to actually determine the earliest material availability date. So let's break this a little bit down first. What does that mean to determine an earliest material availability date? And let's also break down on which type of object level we kind of determine this function. And let's start with the latter question. With the first question first. So this is almost a logical answer to the most obvious question, like how to close this gap, between what seems to got lost within Business Central and how to get there. And if a date information, and in this case the material availability, does not per se exist in a system like Business Central, I mean, if you build a product that should come or that should facilitate an earliest material availability date, as a developer like us, you have two options, right? This information is not missing, so now you have at least two ways to get this information into the system. The first way is you can just say, okay, we allow the users to set it manually, right? Then you can say, okay, well, you track your material availability information on this giant Excel sheet, and while you manage in the Excel sheet, if you see it there, then take the data and put it manually on the production order, or on the production order line. And you can do this, and I know that there are products out there who do it exactly like this. There also were products out there who did it exactly like this. So for Navision, there was an APS system called Planner One. They did it exactly like this. They said, okay, we give the user the capability to set this date manually, pull it from whatever information source they have, and then we can use it as a restriction for scheduling. Well, it's a smart idea. You have the date somewhere on your giant Excel sheet, then you set it on this field in Business Central, and then this is a restriction for scheduling. So then you can tell the software, please do not schedule this production order before the earliest material availability date that was set manually. This is one option. The other option, because we are talking about a date, and a date is something that we can also calculate. We can make a date the output of like a mathematical calculation. You also have the option to calculate it, right? You also have the option to say, okay, there is actually a bunch of data in Business Central that somehow is related to material availability, and why not taking this data, other than having whatever kind of information sources, but taking the data that you have and try to calculate whatever the most feasible material availability date from the data we already have. And when we designed the VAPS, we decided for the latter option. So we did not say, okay, we will put a field in Business Central where you can put the date manually, but we, as a design decision for the VAPS, we decided, hey, we're going to calculate an earliest material availability date based on the information that manufacturing customers have already in their system. So that was the first design decision, like how to come to this date, how to close the gap. And we had those two options. We discussed those two options. We said, okay, no, we don't go like the easy way, we go the hard way, and we calculate this date based on what we have. And then the next step is like where and how to make this information available. And so we said, okay, on the very first glance and the very first level, it is an information that is important on production order line level. So we decided against the production order because we can have, depending on how you build the production orders, you can have multiple production order lines. Either if this is make to order, then you have these nested production order lines, or if you create a project order from a sales order, then you have multiple items on this production order and all lines are equal. And so we said, in the end, what customers produce is ultimately described on the production order line level. So here we say, this is my item number, this is the quantity, and we have some other information. So we said, okay, somehow the result of our calculation should be written into the production order line. So you see here, there's an earliest material availability date field on the production order line. This earliest material availability date field is added to the production order line table with the installation of the VAPS. And then when the calculation is run, it also is populated with a date. Like in this case, it says for that production order that I have here, the earliest material availability date is the 26th of February 24. And by the way, we will look at this particular production order later on when I do the demo. And then we said, okay, how to get here, how to get the earliest material availability date for a production order line? Well, this should be determined by all the components that I need to make this item. So here I have the item, I'm producing the item number 12. And for that item, of course, I will require some components. So actually what should drive this earliest material availability date on the production order line level is the material availability on the component line level. So now I drilled down one level from that production order line into the production order component lines. And you see also here, we actually added a minimum one column when we installed the VAPS also to the production order components table. And this is again the earliest material availability date. And now you see here, and this is a very, very lean BOM with only 4 parts, with only 4 components. And you see I'm needing 4 components to build this product number 12 that we looked at before. And I actually see, and my work date is the 31st of January. So I see those first 3 components. They are available today. So most likely I have them on stock. But we also see this last component here will be only available on the 26th of February. So it will be available in 4 weeks from now, or 3.5 weeks from now. So most likely, and we will look into this again, this availability, which is not today, but this is like it will be available in the future in 3.5 weeks from now. Most likely this availability, for example, will be then achieved by a purchase order. So I might have a purchase order in the system, and the expected receipt date of the purchase order is the 26th of February. And so now if we look at this, like the time when I have all components available for that production order, or for that production order line, for that item to be precise, is the 26th of February. So now I go a slide back on the production order line level. The 26th of February is set as the earliest material availability date because this is the date when all the required components are available. And then that was like how we used to have the EMAD on the VAPS for almost 2 years. And then with the recent release we also went down the hierarchy level another step, because of course you have the capability to define routing links in Business Central. So you say that you can say that a particular item is not needed when you start the production, but a particular item is needed only for the 3rd routing step, or for the 4th routing step, or whatever. So especially if you produce something and, for example, have a very precious component that you don't need for the 1st step, and the first 2 steps are running quite long, then you might not want to have the material on stock while the first steps are running, but you want to have delivered more or less in time when you start with the production on the 3rd routing step. And so now we also have the capability to have earliest material availability date information on the routing line level. So now I'm still on the same production order. I'm on another production order. I drill down into the routing. I see the routing steps, and we see for a lot of steps, the earliest material availability is the 31st of January, but for this one, we are on the 8th. And so this means we can start producing this 4th step only here, whereas for the rest, it is available earlier. So we could start with it earlier, but then have to wait for the 4th step until the 8th of material before some critical material is available. So I see that I'm getting the first question. How does the EMAD work when some of the components of the production order are also replashed by other production orders? I mean, when the BOM is multi-level. When the BOM is multi-level, it's the same type. So then we go the hierarchy. We follow the hierarchy of the BOM. So following the low-level codes. and then if you have a multi-level BOM, then you have, you have two options. Either you have the parts make to stock, then there is absolutely no issue, because then you have the lower hierarchy materials produced, or you have a finish date for them if you produce them, and then if it's make to order, then you have them all on one production order, and then also we start looking from the lowest component up to the finished good, and the finish dates for the components that you produce determine the availability dates of the next elements that consume these according to the multi-level BOM. So the principle is just the same. I'm starting here with flat, and we can look at more difficult cases later, but the principle is just the same, and then we follow the low-level codes there. I hope this answered the question. If not, then we can also look at this, at the end of the meeting again, or do a separate meeting on this if you want to see kind of how this works in complex structures. Then as I said before, and I can't stress it often enough, the EMAT that we have in the VAPS is a calculated field. So if you're a user, you must trigger the calculation. It does not calculate itself somehow magically. We add those fields to the production order line, or routing lines, to the production order lines, to production order component lines, but somehow these dates or these fields must get populated with dates, and these dates that you see, they are a result of the calculation, and as of now, the calculation must get triggered. So as these are calculated values as a result of a triggered calculation, they are static. They do not get updated automatically. So if you calculate them, we write these values into the production order lines, the production order routing lines, into the production order component lines. And then if you would never ever run the calculation again, then the dates would just stay there as they are. So we do not automatically update them. They get automatically updated when you say, I want to calculate again. And this is very important to know. So actually, when we work with customers and implement processes with them, we actually encourage them to calculate the earliest material availability date first before they do scheduling. So always make sure that those dates are updated so that the calculation is run. And if you don't want to do it manually, so if you don't want to trigger the calculation always manually, of course you can automatic or you can automize it by adding the EMAT calculation to the job queue. And I will show you briefly how to do this later in this webinar. So you can have it automatically updated. I would then put it into the job queue so that I get it automatically updated at night, so that at least like on a daily basis, these values are updated. But if you don't put them on the job queue, then the user, so the person doing the scheduling, must be aware of that those fields here are static. They are a result of a mathematical calculation, and you need to calculate them anew if you want to get new data, and the calculation needs to be triggered by the user. Very, very, very important. Otherwise, you will start scheduling based on outdated material availability information or material availability information that most likely do not reflect the current situation. So let's actually talk about the EMAT calculation itself. So the EMAT calculation itself is something that we do for a given period of time that the user can define. So the EMAT calculation never runs into the past, makes no sense, because then the material is consumed, but the EMAT calculation starts today and goes until a specific moment in the future that you as the user can define. And then what we do is, when we basically say calculate the EMAT, in the first step, we create a unique list of component demand. And we do this for every day. So we say for today, we need that many pieces of this component. We need that many kilograms of that component. We need that many liters of those components. We need that many, whatever, tons of that component. We need that many pieces of this component. So we just collect the demand per component per day, and we take into account all potential demand sources that we have in Business Central. So the demand from production orders, the demand from sales orders, because we can produce, sometimes we can produce products that we can also that we can both sell and then use for further production. We take demand from transfer line, from job planning lines, from service line, and from the assembly orders. And after we have this list of component demand per day, we also create a unique list of component supply. And we do it again by day. We say, okay, today we have this type of supply. This is what we have in inventory. This is what we get from purchase order. This is what we produce. This is what we assemble. This is what we have as an output of a job, whatever. So we take all supply sources into account so that we day by day can see, based on the information we have in Business Central, what is the demand per component and what is the supply per component. And then we allocate the supply of the component to the component demand. Very important. So then we say, okay, for today, we need whatever, 50 units of component A, and we have 100 units of component A on stock. And then we allocate 50 of this to this production. And then we know, okay, 50 remain not allocated, and then we may have them available for a new demand that we see tomorrow. And we do this day by day by day. The important thing is I explicitly say we allocate component supply to component demand. This is how we call it. We make an allocation, and this allocation just happens in what we call the VAPS world. So we calculate a value, the EMAD. It's a calculated value. In order to make this calculation, we make an allocation. But the allocation does not result in a fixed reservation in Business Central. So we do not reserve the material for that production order in terms of writing into table 337. We just make an allocation. So we just say, okay, we would need this material for this production order. This is very important to know. I will come to reservation in a minute again. We don't change the reservations or the reservation table. Of course, we pull information from table 337, but we don't change it right now. So I see there's another question. Is EMAT calculated per location? Yes, I would say it in that way. We take the location code into account. So if you have a supply in one location that has one location code, and have your demand on the location with the other location code, and if there's no transfer order, then we would not allocate, because the supply is the one location and the demand is in the other location. If you have a transfer order, then of course we could allocate it. So yes, we don't show the result per location, but we take the location code into account. So then, as we do not make reservation, what do we do with reservations? We do not work against them. So we work with reservations. And I know there are some customers who work extensively with reservations, and others, they try to avoid reservations at all. So if you work with reservations, we take them into account. So if you have components that are reserved, we respect this. Then we take this reservation, and with this reservation, we make in our VAPS world the allocation. So we do not allocate the reserved components to another production order, but we allocate the reserved components to exactly the production order that they are reserved for. And so these components then get the date from the reservations as EMAT. What you can do, because what we are doing is we are fulfilling demand, right? We're fulfilling component demand, and you as a user can define which demand you want to fulfill first. So you can say, okay, for example, if I have an item that I produce, and then once it is produced, I can sell it, or I can put it on stock and then use it for further production. So I can use it as part for a bigger product, or I can sell it as a component to my customers. And we have a lot of customers who do so. Then you can say, well, if I have these type of items where I have different demand sources, then I can specify which demand to fulfill first. So I can say, if I have for this item that I just explained, I would say, okay, if I have a sales order, I would always fulfill the demand from the sales order first and then from the production order. This is done via a specific setting that we call the EMAD demand priority, and we will look at this over the course of the demo. Then there is what is called the allocation time or the allocation time frame, and this is what I also mentioned. You can define a time frame starting from today for which you want to calculate the EMAD, and this is done via the VAPS setup. So and we always, of course, recommend to have this in sync with your scheduling time frame. So if you always schedule the next 4 months, it would make sense to also calculate the EMAT for the next 4 months, and not only for the next 1 month, but also not for the next 12 months. So it is kind of recommended to keep your typical scheduling period, which you define when you create a simulation, and the EMAT timeframe, that you keep this in sync. And if there is enough component supply on a certain day, we allocate that supply to the component line and have an earliest material availability date for that component. So like we saw here on this slide, we could allocate this. There was sufficient supply on that day, so we could make the allocation. It also says allocated here, and this is the date for which we could make the allocation. What is also important to know is the last bullet. So we do all or nothing. So here in my case, let me go back here. In my case, we could allocate all materials, right? And so we got one slide back, one earliest material availability date for the production order line. If, for example, the letter component here would not be available at all in the period we look at, then it would say allocation failed here. And then we would remove those allocations again to use the material potentially for other production orders. So what we do all or nothing. So either we find an earliest material availability date so we can make the allocation for all components, but if it is missing for one component, then we remove all the others so that we can use the material for other production or for other like demand types. And this is something that I had on the slides before. A production order typically requires multiple components. If the components in the are available in the time frame we look at and have different availability dates, then we set these different availability dates on the component lines. And then for the production order line, we take the latest availability date as the earliest availability date for the production order line. So you see there's a next question coming. Can we see to which document or inventory is component allocated? Yeah, we can see this. So I will show you this. Actually, there are some hidden interesting information in the VAPS so that we can see how we allocate it and also where the material is missing. So I will come to this maybe in 10 minutes. So just give me some more minutes to run through some of the basics here, and then we look at this, how this is in the VAPS. So then, now we know how the date is determined. Then we already saw, and I mentioned this, that as we do the allocation, an allocation can have, or the attempt to do an allocation can have different outcomes, and hence there are different allocation types. And you saw already here, I didn't highlight it, but when we look here at the production order component lines, there's another column, earliest material availability allocation type, and here it says allocated. So here the allocation could get done. However, it could also be that we have a production order in the system where we have component lines where we never did the EMAT calculation, because we create a new production order, and for this new production order, we never tried an allocation. So then in the same color, you would not see allocated as we saw before, but we would see pending. And this means we never run an EMAT calculation for that production order line. If it says allocated, it's like it was before. We could allocate the component supply to the demand, and the earliest material availability date could get set to the production order component line. Then it can happen that the allocation fails, right? There is not enough component supply for the component demand, and we could not set an EMAT date, an earliest material availability date, and then we write into this column that we saw, we don't write allocated, but we said allocation failed, so that we know, hey, actually, in the time frame we are looking at, the material is missing. And then we also have the allocation type allocation remove. This is the material was available, but on the same production order line, there are other production order component lines where the material was not available, where the allocation failed. And then because we do all or nothing, we remove the allocation for that material that was available. And then we remove it and then we write it there. So then if we look at the production order, and we will do it in the demo, if we look at the production order where it says allocation removed, allocation failed, allocation removed, removed, then we know where we would have had enough material, but we also know which material is missing and where we, for example, should trigger a purchase order. So there are a couple of settings that you can do, and I think now I will run a little bit back and forth between here the PowerPoint slides and the demo. So let me log in here again, see another question coming. When we will change in purchase order line the quantity or the receipt date, will the allocation be removed? No, the allocation will not be removed, but next time the allocation will show a different result. So we don't remove the allocation automatically, but next time we run the allocation, then we get a different result, and then it might be that the allocation is removed or it will fail. So it is nothing. If you make changes somewhere, for example, if you put a new expected receipt date on the purchase order, there is no automatic update of the EMAT. It is always the result of the calculation. And hence also these allocation types, also they do not change automatically, but always only if you run the calculation. So let's start here with some EMAT related settings, and now I do it like this. The first is the look ahead window, so the time frame that we are going to look forward when we do the EMAT allocation. This is what we call the look ahead window, and this is something which you do in the VAPS setup. In the VAPS setup, there is a couple of things that you can define and configure, and there is the section material availability. And here you can say, hey, I want to do the calculation for the next 16 weeks, or I want to do it for the next 4 months, or whatever. The next setting that you can do here is you can switch on or off if you want to use routing links. So if you have routing links, and if you want to consider the routing links in the EMAT allocation, and if you want to have EMAT information on the production order routing line level, then you should switch this on. And if you don't want to use it, then you switch it off. In my case, I want to do this. So I want to calculate the EMAT on the production order line level if I have BOMs and routings with routing link. And so then I switch it on here. So these are the EMAT related things that are global. These are global settings, and so you do them on the VAPS setup. However, there's also another global setting, but we have an own dialog for this because we couldn't get it into the this general settings dialog where we have just options, switch on, switch off, and define some time frames. And then we have the question of what is the earliest material availability demand priority, and there is an own setting dialog to it. So under VAPS, we have the EMAT demand priority, and here I can actually say, okay, like in my case here, let me sort this. I want to fulfill the demand from sales line first, then production order component, then job planning, and then service and assembly and transfer. But you can also you could also change the priorities from here and say, I want to, whatever, do production orders first, And I don't do this now and then do sales orders and so on and so forth. So here you define the priority that you take into account, so which demand to fulfill first. And this is also something, these are typically those first three settings that you do most likely in the implementation of the program and then not later. Then we have another one that is then again in the VAPS setup, but it's not on the material availability, but then this is a scheduling parameter. I can say that when I schedule and when I do an automatic scheduling of multiple production orders, do I want to take the EMAT into account or not? So if I switch this on, we take the earliest material availability date as a time restriction. So then with automatic scheduling, we would never schedule a production order line before its EMAT date. You can still violate the EMAT date with drag and drop, but for all automatic scheduling, the EMAT date would always be a hard restriction. So we say consider EMAT if we switch this on, like the add all function that we have in the VAPS, or the add all including alternatives would take the EMAT, the calculated EMAT value as a hard restriction, and we would never violate this. So this is something you can also define from here. Then we also have EMAT settings on the item card. So let's go to the item card, because sometimes we want to make exceptions from the rule. And so let me go to an item card here, product design, items, and let me take whatever. Let me take from my demo data a random item. Doesn't matter, both is not set here, but we have on the item card, that's in the item header, we have the EMAT tolerance percentage, and we have exclude from EMAT. So let's start with exclude from EMAT. So from time to time, we might have components that are very commodity, and we know we can purchase and get those components whenever we want, and we don't want actually make our production scheduling being dependent from data we have about those components in the system. And then I can say, okay, I want to exclude this from EMAT, and then we would just do not take this component into account when we do the EMAT allocation. This is actually also something that you can, and I'm seeing I'm already advanced in time, but this is also something, like I said on my slides, this is also can be set from the item category. Let me go there quickly. So item category. So on the item categories, if I drill down into the item categories, then on a specific item category, I can also say exclude from EMAT, and then this will be inherited from here to all items that belong to this category, and then all items that would belong to this category, if this is excluded from EMAT, will be excluded from the EMAT allocation. So we can take them out. Then the other setting we can do on the item card is the EMAT tolerance percentage. So to explain this, let me go back to the slides for a second. So this can be set if you do not need 100% of the component supply. And the example from our customers is then what I recognize is if one of your components is liquid, then sometimes it doesn't, and then on your BOM you say from this liquid I need whatever 1,000 liters. But every customer would tell you, okay, if we only have 950 liters on stock and not 1,000, then we would start the production, because actually it doesn't matter if it's 950 or 1,000 liters, the quality of the product in the end will be the same. And if you have this, so if you have some tolerances in your BOM, in your component structure, then you can set an EMAT tolerance. So if you set the tolerance to 10%, then we will say allocated. For example, if you would need 10 pieces of that component but only have 9 on stock, then we say, okay, if my tolerance is 10%, then I can start producing with a piece of 9, although the BOM says 10. So this this gives some flexibility here as well. And then the last thing, and we can also look at this from the slides, from the demo already, we can run the EMAT allocation from the job queue. So if I go to my job queue entries, we could create a new one, and then I would have to execute a code unit. The code unit to search for, and I would search for EMAT. Takes a while. And then we have the net VAPS, so the electronic VAPS calculate EMAT job queue. And so we would take this job this code unit, and then we would specify when this is when we should do the calculation, and then you can put the EMAT calculation into whatever your nightly job queue, so that when your production scheduler gets into the office the next morning, then the EMAT allocation is already done. And then last but not least on the slides, and this was one of the questions that got asked, if we can see like which document is allocated where. This is what I call the hidden VAPS superhero. This is the demand list. And we will look at this actually now, where also my slide says that have a look. So I will go back to the demo environment and have a brief look at the VAPS now, and how we calculate the information, how we trigger the calculation if we don't do it from the job queue, what I just showed you, what the result is, and how we visually deal with this. So some content to squeeze in the last 15 minutes of this webinar. So the VAPS is built around the idea of making the production scheduling based on simulations. And before we do the production scheduling, we recommend the users to do the EMAT calculation. If this is not part of the job queue, we have to trigger it. And this means the first thing, if you're as a production planner in the simulation area here, and if you don't have it from the job queue, is to do the EMAT allocation. And with the EMAT allocation, if I press calculate allocation, what happens is what I just described. We do day by day by day for the look ahead window, which is in my case, as we just learned, is 4 months. So from today, which is the 31st of January 24, for the next 4 months, I will look day by day by day, what is my component supply and what is my component demand, and then I try to component supply to component demand. And so I do this now. We see here I have only 188 demand entries, so this is quite quick. I have customers that have whatever for a given period of time 5,000 demand entries, then this takes a couple of minutes. There's something that you can start and then go and take a cup of coffee. But if it takes longer, if you have really deep bombs, then put this into the night queue, into the job queue. And so now here we already see, like, what is the item number? What is the item description? What is the document type? We see a date, and we see the supply type. So this is like this shows us the result of the allocation, and here we see, of course, here we could allocate from inventory. Here we have a mixed supply. So this is not from inventory, but this may be whatever, a bit from inventory, a bit from a purchase order, or whatever. So sometimes we show it, and sometimes it's from a reservation. So we just give this information. More interesting is, and this is shown here, is the demand list. So the demand list shows us all component demands from all production order component lines that were part of the EMAT allocation, and it shows us also the allocation type. So it shows us that whatever this item was demanded from that production order on that day in this quantity, and we could allocate it on that day. And we also see that from this item, this is the quantity that was available when we made the allocation. And so from here, actually, I can I mean, I think I can export the list actually to Excel and then do some stuff there. But from here, actually, I can filter, and then I can see, okay, where did the allocation fail? And then I see where the allocation failed, and then, okay, these are two components. Maybe I don't have the production orders for this, but this is a part that I purchased. So I already know now that for the time period I'm looking at, for the next 4 months, I would need a purchase order for that part to fulfill a demand of 50 units from this production order on the 12th of March, because here the allocation failed. So, and from this demand list that we have here, we can actually make a lot of conclusions. We also now can see, okay, we have this production order, so this is 101082. Let's clear the filter on production order number, and you see where this is going to, 101082. And then we see, okay, this is the production order, this is the demand from the production order, and we see here the allocation failed. The other allocations, if we make this a little bit bigger, we will see these other allocations got removed. So we know, okay, we had all components available, but the last one was the one that was problematic. So this is really an interesting part, an interesting type of information. The question is, you said day by day from today. What about historical demand? Yesterday, day before yesterday? Well, we start only from today. So we don't look in the past. So if you have demand still in the past that is not satisfied, then I would say first move the demand into the future, because if the demand is in the past and you haven't fulfilled the demand, then you have to replan again, and then you put this production order into the future and then see if the future demand can get fulfilled. But we never look back. It just makes no sense, because from my point of view, because we do production scheduling always looking into today or in the future, especially in the future. So the EMAD allocation always starts from today, so from the work date into the future, but never back. So if there is still an open demand from yesterday, well, then this needs some replanning anyway. So then once the EMAT is allocated, I would create a simulation, and what I do now is I copy my production orders for a certain period so that I can schedule them. And because we are talking about material availability, I select the view color type availability view. So first of all, the EMAT values that we now have calculated, they get taken into account when we do automatic scheduling. Nevertheless, we already saw we have some cases where the allocation failed, so where the material is not available. And of course, when I'm in the production schedule, I want to see this information that I have a material issue on one glance. And this is what we use the availability color view for. So now, if I open the simulation, if I look at my production schedule, if I have the availability view, I look at my schedule, but with the focus on the question, do I have material or not? So the schedule only knows two colors, and this is red and green. With red meaning there is a violation of the earliest material availability date, and green means this is scheduled to start after the earliest material availability date. And you see that actually some of my production orders are shown red. And let me start with the first one. So let's start with this one here. This is already scheduled to my machines, and it shows in red. So why is this? Well, this is scheduled to start on the 19th of February. And if I look at the production order, line, starting time 19th of February, the earliest material availability date is the 26th of February. So how does this date come to there? This is the example I had on the screenshot. On the component lines, I see the first components are available today. This one is only available on the 26th of February. And if I go quickly to the item card, I see I have nothing on stock. I have a demand 50 from the component line, and I have a supply of 50 on purchase order. So if I look at the supply, I see there is one purchase order, and the expected receipt date is the 26th. So if I don't produce it, if I don't have it on stock, then this is my only demand source. And if my supplier tells me this comes on the 26th, then the 26th is the earliest material availability date for that component. And so the 26th is the first date when all of these items are available. So how can it be that it is on my schedule before that date? Well, there are two potential explanations. The first explanation is I moved it there. So manually, I can violate the earliest material availability date because maybe I know that this supplier can deliver earlier. Or the other explanation is I ran the scheduling yesterday, and yesterday on that purchase order, the expected receipt date was the 19th of February. So I scheduled it according to the information I had yesterday. Then after I scheduled it, my supplier called the purchaser and said, look, we have some delivery issues, whatever, people are sick and we need to deliver a week later. And then my purchaser updated the expected receipt date on the purchase order to the 26th of February. I reran the EMAD and I get the new information. And now I need to move it to where the earliest material availability date is. And you see when I start moving it, the screen is gray where the material is not available. It is lighter when the material is available. So if I move it to here and drop it here where the material is available, then we see, okay, it turns green again. However, I can violate it. I can put it back here and say, no, user knows best. This supplier promised me to deliver early. I put this here. This is also no problem. The other thing that we had is, and I will look at this. The other thing that we had is this one. There, the allocation failed. So this is still on standby. Maybe this is a very new production order that was just added to the system, and I don't have all material available yet. So if I look in here, you see the earliest material availability date could not set. And if I ask myself why, I would go to the component lines again, and then I see here, okay, allocation removed. This means I had material, and this one failed. So now I have two options. I can, right now, we don't take the purchase lead time into account going forward. This is something we definitively will consider, but right now I could go to the item card and see if there would be any lead time on the item card, and then if the lead time would be 4 weeks, then I would put this to the schedule already and then publish the schedule, because then I know that this component would get a new demand date, and if the purchase guy run the requisition worksheet, it will recognize a new demand, and then it would crank the new production order. And similar case is here. So here is a production order that I put to the schedule, although there is no earliest material availability. But here in this case, the material that I need are components that I also need to produce. And so the allocation failed because I have no production orders for those components yet. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to schedule the final product first with the VAPS against finite capacity so that I have a realistic date when I can complete them. And now if I publish it, I have a demand date for those components where I need to create the production orders. And then when I run the planning worksheet, it would suggest to me the production orders for those components that I built. And then I could schedule them before that date. So this is basically what I share with customers when we talk about how the earliest material availability functions within Business Central works. Typically, these sessions with customers take, I would say, on average 2 hours, because we do this part a little bit more extensively, and then also we look into customers' data. We then execute the EMAD function. We look at their data. I help them to interpret the demand list. I help to interpret the data that they see there. But what I shared with you now is kind of part of our process of taking customers live using the VAPS. And of course, if we work with customers and help partners to get the customers live, we just have more time available to kind of look at singular functions of the products, take a deeper dive And I decided for myself to make this also now as part of the webinar, because when we do VAPS demos, we talk 5 minutes about the earliest material availability date. And I sensed this is a topic that is interesting to everybody. So I decided to spend some time now to kind of share with you what we teach customers who are going to use the product. And with this, I want to open it up for question and actually try to answer the first question that I get. I just get no question. I just got the endorsement that this is an interesting function, so thank you for this. Yeah, and as with other functions in the VAPS, everything we do always is work in progress. So we also have some ideas of how to make the EMAD functionality better. But I think it is actually quite useful as it is. It helps a lot of our customers to get an understanding, but of what the material situation is for their production orders. But it is still a calculated value. But I think a calculated value is better than nothing. But when customers work with calculated values, I think they should know how the calculation is done and what it means with working with the calculated material availability date. So with this, if you have no more questions, and I see that there's one coming, then again, thanks to all of you for your interest in our products, for your interest in what we do, but also for your time to attend the webinars that I run. As said earlier, although you're on mute here, I'm really interested in engaging with all of you. So if you have questions, drop me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. Sometimes I then connect you with my colleagues who are more familiar with your region, who serve the partners in your region, or who serve you as a partner in certain reasons. But definitively, you can always use me as the hub into Netronic if you're unsure whom to talk to. Sometimes I answer directly. Sometimes I put you into contact with the right people to deal with you guys. So I see there is another question. There's one question. Some settings are missing from VAPS setup. Which version do we need? Well, the version, that's a good question, actually. Thanks for asking this. The version that I needed, that I showed here is, and you can go to extension management. So I'm in Business Central 21, and I will answer this question. I will take a few more minutes time. So I'm in Business Central 21, and I'm using the VAPS version 1.11. So one important thing is we continuously enhance our products, and continuously enhancing means we launch at least one new product version per quarter. Microsoft does 1.5 years, we do one a quarter. Sometimes we do 2 in a quarter, but at least 1 in a quarter. And at some point of time, we decided that with the new versions we built, we can no longer be backward compatible with all Business Central versions that are out there. So we started with Business Central 14, we made it for 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and now we are at Business Central 21. And at some point of time, we decided to kind of adapt Microsoft's modern lifecycle policy. So when we build new function, we always build it for the most recent Business Central version, which is right now for Business Central 21. And other than Microsoft, we are not as rigid as they are. We say, okay, new versions also come, or we try our best to make them available also for the previous 2 versions. So first of all, when you ask the question of which version we are, so this is Business Central 21. This is the VAPS 1.11. This is the most recent version of the VAPS. We released this mid of October. Or beginning of October, I don't know, so 6 weeks ago. So this is the most recent version, and the version that I showed you also had some EMAD enhancements, and this is available for Business Central 21, 20, and 19. So if you who asked the question are on Business Central 15, then you need to first upgrade your Business Central that you can work with the most recent version of the VAPS. So I'm really glad that you asked this question, and I think it was very helpful to put this into perspective. Could we have availability colors on operation number and not for the whole production order? Yeah, this is actually the case. Let me go back again, and another great question. Let me go back to the demo as well. Sorry. Now you should be able to see my screen again. I'm back, and if not, let me just do it like this. So if let's take this one. Here you see it already. We know that the earliest material availability date is the 26th. So this one here is shown in red because it's before the 26th, but all the other operations that are past the 26th, they are in green. So they are already when the material is available. If I would pull this to the left, it would show red. So here it takes the earliest material availability date from the production order line. I have another example that I did not show you in the webinar. This is this one. This is green. This is green. Material availability, material available, material not available, material available again. And this is an example where I actually have routing links. And here is the routing link on the first step, and it says some material is only acquired here, and this material is only available on the 8th of March. And so this here is violating this. So if I would move it to whatever later, then this would get green again, and the others would be green again. So we make the coloring already per operation and not per entire production order. So I hope that this answered the question. There is another one. Could you elaborate a bit on the effects on flushing method in relation to EMAD? You had manual example, but what about forward, backward? Well, I think this is something we should take offline. Yeah, we should take offline. But my knowledge is that the flushing method has no impact on the EMAT, because this is then the question of the point of consumption and nothing that necessarily is required for the planning, but really happy to have an offline call with you on this. How does it work with lot numbers and expiration dates? Well, good question. I do not know. I have actually to check this. What we are currently working on is that if you have incoming material and then if you block the lot for some quality inspection issues or reasons, then going forward we will take out the blocked lot from the EMAD allocation, but I do not know how this is with lot expiration dates. This is also something I need to check. I'm not 100% sure. So thanks for the question. I will need to get smart on this, and then I can make you smart on this. What statuses of purchase orders are needed to cover demand in EMAD? I think it's the purchase order must not be released. It can just be a purchase order that you create, but it can be both open and released. So thanks for the question again, and also and what about blanket orders? This actually also something I have to check. So Andre, you're asking also a lot of questions like Jens did earlier. I suggest we can also have a separate meeting on this so that we can take an even deeper dive and look into some of the also the more advanced Business Central functions. I'm right now not 100% sure how this is with the blanket purchase orders, but I will have a look and then let you know, and then we can do a separate call on this either before Christmas or in the new year, depending on how busy you are and how busy I am. But I will definitively have a look and let you know. So again, there were a couple of really cool questions. Thank you very much. If you have more, and for the sake of the length of the webinar, I think I will now wrap this up. If you have more questions, then here are my contact details. Send me an email, and I will definitively give you an answer. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not on Friday, but in due course. And also I will look into the questions that I couldn't answer right now and then reach out to you via email with some more details. With this, if you're not connected, please connect. If you have questions, please send an email. And if you have any idea how we can do better with the VAPS, please let me know. As said, the product is software and hence it is never ready. And we always open for great ideas to make it even better. With this, thanks. Enjoy the evening and have a great day. Talk to you soon in one of our webinars. Thank you. Bye-bye.